Welcome to another session. This is, I think, part 5 in a series of conversations that I began some sessions ago around the whole topic about the OnlyFans phenomenon. I have called today's topic Start Late. There's a reason for that. But before I start today's focus, let me begin from where I ended in the previous session. In the session I covered previously, I alluded to the importance of pseudonyms, but more importantly, the importance of separating the act or the actor or actress from the individual. I have found most people are not thinking this through. People generally start OnlyFans without considering all of the potential problems that could ensue as part of the pursuit. For example, the person you are as a content creator needs to be separated from the person you are as an individual. And that simply means, with regards to managing your content, there should be a different pseudonym, a name you use to separate the two parts of who you are. The reason for this is, in the session I covered previously, I made reference to how where you live and where you are from a location perspective matters. If you live in a big city, and let's say there are lots of people and lots of people around your age demographics, then it's not much of a concern because 1 in 300,000 or 1 in 3 million is a relatively big sample size. On the other hand, if you live in a small town or small village and there are fewer women, and in this case we say 1 in 2,000 or 1 in 750, it becomes much easier for people to identify who you are. So, whilst you can argue the opposite side, in other words, if you are in a small village and the median age for men and women was roughly 40 and you're 22, you're more likely to be anonymous in a smaller village because the average person's age far exceeds yours, and therefore there isn't much talk about who you could be and where you live. I started the session about OnlyFans to try and help women think through some decisions. One of the things I suggested was to make sure that you allow a pathway back home, back to love. It's not unusual to find that people start this content production without any information being shared with their loved ones. And eventually, the information becomes too hard to bear by the loved ones when it comes to the surface. And relationships are broken between families, amongst families, between friends, amongst communities. And so what you find as the woman is finally you've achieved something that is successful. You have wealth, but you've lost the loved ones that you once had. That can be traumatic, and that can be quite lonely because effectively, one of the things most people have in the back of their minds is that they can relieve those who they love from all the pain that comes with the lack or the inability to provide. And so here they are thinking from a provisions perspective, by thinking, if I can make this money doing something that I do not necessarily enjoy, it can make a difference for my family and my loved ones. We don't have to work as long as we used to. We can afford a house that can contain all of us without each person sleeping on top of the other person. But it becomes quite sad when, having achieved that goal, the people who you perhaps were looking to help do not want to participate in that new life. So identify the potential obstacles that might be in your way. One of the obstacles has to do with your name. I am a big proponent that if you're going to do something so controversial, something some other people might disagree and say something so liberating and freeing, I personally think otherwise, but if you're going to do such type of content, sexual content, recognize that in the short term, there might be a lot of emancipation movement and people supporting the movement. In 10, 15, 30 years, the mood may have shifted. And the way we once used to look at porn stars as stars rather than prostitutes, we may see a similar thing reoccur with OnlyFans. The idea that women say, well, I'm an OnlyFans entrepreneur or an OnlyFans model is fanciful. If we were using the right word, that would deter most people from starting the process. For example, if we said you are a prostitute, and a prostitute is one who gets paid for sexual services, whether that be physical or whether that be just visual, take off your clothes, spread your legs, all of that will still say you're a prostitute. And we will put people such as strippers, people who are showing and sharing content online, in the same category. The name prostitute would deter most young women from going into the profession. However, if we say you're an OnlyFans model, the connotation model has a positive image. And therefore, with OnlyFans, you can say, well, I'm a model, I'm making money, and therefore I am entrepreneurial. Slightly different. In 20 years, the mood may have changed. So one of the things to consider is, you have a name, you have a legal name. I am stunned at how unwise a lot of young girls are in not knowing that you should not, or you can, but you should not use your legal name in your OnlyFans or Instagram process or websites. Now, here is a contradiction. You might be thinking, well, what about you? Well, this is not about me in any case. But if you're doing explicit content, sexual content, if you're selling information out there or entertainment, have a stage name. It doesn't have to be something too sexy. It could be something that seems like someone's name, but it means you can have a presence, but you're keeping your privacy separate. Now that's the first part of the conversation for today. Let me move quickly into the main theme, which is the topic, start slow. I preface that sentence. I am of the personal opinion that this OnlyFans phenomenon is doing more harm than good, especially to women, especially to the feminine and the female image. I think it's doing a lot of damage to what most women of old, suffragettes, fought for. It's done a lot of harm and will do a lot of harm to children in the future. In any case, let's assume there is no convincing you and you've made up your mind, but you haven't started yet. I think you should delay the start time. Start late. And what that simply means, and here is my perspective. I think a woman's value is higher in the sexual marketplace, which is purely what I'm referring to. As an individual, certainly your value is intrinsically linked, perhaps you might say in your spirit or in your soul. But in the sexual marketplace, where you have buyers and sellers, people looking for affection, intimacy, sex, people looking for relationships, everything is bought. The currency of exchange varies. For some people, it is love. The exchange currency is love. For some people, it is money. For some other people, it's commitment, loyalty, legacy, kindness, a listening ear. We all are bought. Every relationship exists because there is a problem to be solved. The problem is solved via currency. The currency does not have to be fiat. It could be something intangible. And what this simply means is that in the sexual marketplace, a woman's value is the highest from about 18 when she turns into an adult up to about 30. That's the peak of a woman's value, that range. Now, the younger she is, between 18 and 25, she has a much higher value by virtue of various things. Youth, chastity, purity, which is what most men want from women. The reason I say start late is twofold. One is a selfish reason. Let me give you a good example. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of going out into a social event and there are loads of drinks, and perhaps you've just come through a process of saying, I like to cut down on my alcohol consumption. And here you are, and as soon as you arrive, they bring a bottle for you with a glass. And the concern you have is if you start drinking, and let's assume it's 10 p.m., if you start drinking at 10, by 12, you may have had 6 or 7 bottles of beer. You decide cleverly that you will procrastinate in how you drink. So what you do is you simply say to yourself, well, thank you, you take a glass, you take the bottle, you place it in front of you, but you do not open it yet. And in your mind, you set a timeline. It's 10 p.m. and you say, well, I will open the bottle at 10:30. So I buy an extra 30 minutes. So I drink less. And as it gets to 10:30, you push it to 11. And at 11, you open the first bottle. So you've gone through 1 hour of not drinking. And then you say to yourself, now I have opened this bottle, I will make sure I drink this bottle for an hour. And you pace yourself all the way through. So by 12 p.m., you've only had one drink. Had you not had that cognitive thought process of saying, I'm going to delay the timeline or start late, maybe you would have had 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, sometimes even 10 bottles of beer. This is the same principle I'm applying in this case. Let me make it very clear my processes and what I call tenets. I think this is important for women to understand. I think we do a disservice to women in not trying to empower them to be the best that they can be. The tenets I apply to men are similar to those I apply for women. There's only a slight subtle difference. I'll share both so you can see. For men, I say, do not get married before age 35. That's the first. Number 2, do not have any children out of wedlock before age 35. Number 3, your most important focus is your purpose, your vision, the dreams you have, your career, your profession. Number 4, do not live with a woman, at least before age 30. And you don't live with a woman except for the purpose of trial marriage. And it shouldn't exceed 6 months, which means ideally you shouldn't be moving in with a woman until about 34 or 34 and a half. Focus most of your time, 90% or 95%, on your career, your purpose, your dreams. Wait until 30 before you start considering a serious, significant relationship. Between 18 and 30, acquire 10,000 hours of continuous, constant, never-ending growth and improvement in your profession. Between 30 and 35, that's your years of failure, because every man is only as faithful as the temptations he overcomes, and your temptations will come during that phase. You build your masculinity and your manhood between 30 and 35. 5% of your time, therefore, will be spent towards women. I'm not saying you should be a monk, which means you do what you have to do, but relationships can kill your dreams, especially the wrong ones. So, if you want to, have a roster and keep things moving. Don't make promises you cannot keep. Most important thing is do not have children. If you do that and you get to 35, there is no reason why you should not be successful. The flip side of the woman. And one thing I didn't state is for the man, the reason I go through that process. It's a simple one. 18 to 22 is 5 years, college. 23 till 27, another 5 years. 2,000 work hours every single year, that's 10,000 working hours. So that means by 27, 28, you have done 5 years of work, focused work, and you've achieved something. Men, generally speaking, do not do things in a straight line. We squiggle, we make mistakes, we jump between professions. So I allow an extra 20%, which gives you another year, takes you to 29. So as you get into 30, not only have you graduated, have a career or degree that takes you towards a career, you started your career, you're working under someone, you're saving, you're investing, and at 30, you have some level of financial independence. Plus you have your 10,000 hours of work, but you haven't failed. So between age 30 and 35 is 5 years of failure. Translates to another 10,000 hours of failure. We go to the woman. Same principle applies. Do not get married before age 27. Do not move in with a man before age 27. Do not have kids out of wedlock. And do not have kids until at least 27. Your focus and your most important priority should not be your man. It should be your purpose, your dreams, your goals, and you trying to form an identity outside of relationships and man. Not even men, man. Similar to a man, you have the same process. You start at 18, 5 years. 18 to 22. From 23 to 27, you get another 5 years, 10,000 hours of professional, practice and improvement. So at 27, you become really competent at something. You form an identity that is not dictated by other people's opinions about you. Perhaps you become a doctor, you become a surgeon, perhaps you become an accountant, but that you've achieved something. And that simply means you're fully independent, even financially, of a man. People cannot therefore dictate to you what you should or should not do. At 27, you can start to tolerate relationships. You don't move in with a man except as a trial marriage, and you don't do so for more than 6 months. Now, can you see here that what we have is 27 and a half and 35 or 34 and a half? The difference between those two is roughly 7 years, which is what I think is a useful age gap between a man and a woman. Therefore, generally speaking, 35-year-old man dating a 27-year-old woman with the intention of marriage. Then it works. Both parties have achieved something. Both parties respect each other. The 7 years is to allow the man time to fail, to develop his masculinity, his manhood, to become a gentleman, to raise his husband value to the point where he's able to become the protector, provider, priest, profess his love through his presence. Now, the reason I've gone through all of that is because I think it's relevant. When I say start your OnlyFans journey late, the process is as follows. There's something called the balance of power. A woman's value, the younger she is, far exceeds a man's value. This is key. Your sexuality as a woman is your agency. A woman who is 25, her value compared to a man who she's dating who's 25 is of much higher value than the man. They're not equal. A woman who's 25 would have to be dating a man who is about 32, 33, and who is perhaps almost a multi-millionaire. Reason being, a woman's sexual marketplace value is the highest the younger she is. She has youth, she has beauty, she has chastity and purity. A woman's reproductive fertility value is also the highest the younger she is. A woman's non-sexual marketplace value, all things remaining equal, is highest the younger she is. Now those three metrics are what men use in choosing a woman's overall market value. On the other hand, for men, we are judged primarily based on our economic intrinsic value. But the reason I went through the process of asking men to delay is as follows. I use three criteria for judging a woman's value in the marketplace. SMV, RFV, and SMV. But for men, I covered a series and I covered 10 separate sessions and about 9 separate ways of measuring a man's value. It's similar to women's, but there are more important things. His character value, CB, and his manhood value, MV, are the most important. Third, his economic intrinsic value, EIV. Next, you have things such as his sexual marketplace value, his non-sexual marketplace value, his husband's value, his reproductive fertility value, and more. Now, if we go back to the reason why I say start late, it's for the following reasons. The phenomenon of OnlyFans, for some reason, we are seeing women who are just 18, just turned 18, between 18 and say 27, but more so women who are about between, let's say, 20 and 25. They are the ones who are going to OnlyFans. At that point in your life as a woman, your value and your peak value is the highest it can be. From a sexual marketplace value perspective, from a reproductive fertility value perspective, and from a non-sexual marketplace value perspective, you have the highest value. This is partly why you can have a woman who's 25 command the attention and influence someone who's a billionaire or a very wealthy man, or a man from notoriety, a certain socioeconomic level. Why? Because men, we use resources as a value exchange. Women, you use your femininity and your youth and your beauty and your chastity and your purity as a value exchange. So if you're 22, certainly between 18 and 27, and you started OnlyFans, what you're effectively saying is, I'm giving my value so freely to men who are not deserving, despite the equal exchange in cash, but I'm putting it out there. So you're devaluing yourself generally speaking, in the marketplace for money. And that might be a satisfactory exchange on your part, but it's important to understand how men think, because we make a mistake in conflating dating with relationships. Dating is short term. If you're 25, you may not be thinking about a relationship or marriage, which is where I think most young women make a mistake. You cannot see the wood from the trees. You're thinking too short term. You're not thinking about 10 years from now, 20 years from now. If you're 22, marriage, relationships, and the repercussions of your behavior escapes you. But maybe in 15 years or 20 years, remember, if you're 20 and you start OnlyFans in 20 years, you'll still be 40, you'll still be a young woman. It means that one of the things you should try not to do is sabotage your future self just to satisfy your present self. Even if money has been exchanged, it's not a worthy exchange. So my recommendation is a woman should be going into OnlyFans from about 35 and over. You can start from 30. Beauty generally lasts about 12 years for a woman, 18 to 30. Now that's 13 years, but I tend to use 18 to 29. But let's call it 13 years to include those who are just 30. Beauty lasts 12 years. As soon as you turn 30, the options start to drop off very fast and very rapidly. In any case, geriatric I go back a step. At 30, it means your sexual marketplace value is much lower than it was when you were 10 years younger. Just makes sense. I cannot compete from a sexual marketplace value perspective in youth and beauty to my younger self. I cannot. You cannot as a woman. This is just biology 101. You may have gained something such as experience, wisdom, knowledge, even in economic value terms. You may have gained much more, but from a physical perspective of purity and chastity and beauty and youth, that look, you cannot compete with a younger woman. So it's best to wait. At 35, your reproductive fertility value gets to a point where medical professionals will say you are at high risk. Medical terminology is called geriatric pregnancy. Your obs-gyn will tell you that it's not safe for both the mother and the child to go through that process. And as you wait longer, it gets worse. Now, there are exceptions, and there are things that can be done to make sure that you maximize the possibility of things being safe, such as lifestyle, health, diet, energy delivery mechanisms, such as detoxifying yourself, and more. There's certain things that can be done, but nature starts to shut down the gate. Now, this simply means at 35, if I use 35 as a guide, at 35, you've hit what we call the wall, high-risk pregnancy. In addition to that, your sexual marketplace value, from my calculations, you've lost about 75-80% of all of your sexual value. At 36, you can't compete with a 20-year-old woman, just cannot. But in addition to that, the quality of eggs and the quantity of eggs you have declined. You've lost about 85% of your eggs, quality and quantity. Now, what this also means is that 35, your non-sexual marketplace value will be less than it was the younger you were. So there's a trifecta here. As you age as a woman, you have less of what men want. Based on an equal exchange, a man who's 35 will not generally date a woman who's 35 because he feels that he is delayed gratification and he's made himself into something. So he wants something of equal value, which is a younger woman. And here is the trick, and something to keep to heart. If you can delay the start of OnlyFans to 35, what you're giving yourself the opportunity to do is maximize the ability and the potential of meeting someone. Firstly, even before that, what you give yourself is the opportunity to achieve something, discover your purpose, become successful, start a career, a profession, get a job, develop an identity outside of being a sexual entertainer. So that you can say that you have an identity and a personality outside of the whole thing about prostitution. One of the things that I have noticed is that most women who do OnlyFans, the younger they are, if you've seen one of them, you've seen all of them. It's almost as though it's a same person in a different garment. It's almost predictable. You can almost predict what they say, especially the younger they are, especially between age say 20 and say 29. It's almost so predictable, it's become laughable. And part of the reason for that is you find younger girls are starting this journey and they haven't achieved anything. Many of them never went to college. Many of them never had fathers. Many of them never saw a two-parent family modeled. Many of them did not really have an intact family. Most of them did not have any form of boundary setting and boundary enforcement by a masculine role model and a feminine role model. They never had rough and tumble play. They never had structures. They never had their feelings expressed or listened to. So some of these women are lost. And when I see some of these young girls, I see a common theme. And as someone in my age, the feeling I have is sadness. And honestly, it's sadness, not for them. I'm sad at the fact that they were robbed of the opportunity to have been loved, nurtured, cared for, provided with the right foundation for life, so that they were not out here looking and trying things. Now we go back. You delay, you start late to give yourself the greatest opportunity to achieve something, first with your life. To give you, secondly, the opportunity to maybe have started a relationship and met someone. Thirdly, to give you the opportunity, who knows, to even start a family. So you can get it out of the way, and then you can decide whether you want to go into this lane of work. 35, therefore, coincides also with the time when your value as a woman starts to decline. And at that point in time, if men want to pay you for your body, for your content, more power to you. The great thing about it is if you get married at 27, at 35, assuming you wanted to have kids, and let's say you wanted to have 3 kids and you started at 28, it simply means if you stair-step the kids, one 35, the first one at 28, second one at 30, and the third one say at 32, by 35, they would all have graduated, they all have gone through the initial preschool, going into school. You have the opportunity to start your career again, recognizing you worked from 23 to 27, you can go back to work. But if you wanted to start content production at 36, you've raised your children properly. And the key thing is you've eliminated the concern most men have, which is a biological concern from evolution, and that has to do with a woman's promiscuity. How do I know I am the father of the children? I tend to take a position which is, once a woman has had a child for a man, and she has an affair, beyond that period, I take that to be less of an issue than if she did so during the process before the children were born. Because at least the man knows these are my kids. Whereas if this infidelity was happening at the same time as the children were being born, except you've done a paternity test, the greatest fear most men have is, how do I know these are my children? So by waiting till 35, you can have all that sorted if you want to have a family. And therefore, you can say to the man in your life, I like to do this. I'm giving you children, so you at least you know that there is no issue about loyalty and lineage. That is done. This is something I like to explore, and I like your support in helping me explore that option. That is slightly different. Now, one of the things that comes with that is, in the future, 20 years from now, you can look your children in the eye and say, listen, girls, I had all of you first because I thought that was the right thing to do. And I started this process. So I don't want you to feel bullied in school, people thinking, are you sure he's your father or your mom is a slut? No, I had you first. I did not contaminate my womb. I held myself together. I birthed you, and then I started the journey. So 35 is what I recommend to women as the timeline to start any OnlyFans content. Now, the fascinating thing is, and here's the key thing. In the sessions I did about 3 days ago, I covered how men, we have needs that change. seasonally or by taste. I have also noticed in terms of OnlyFans producers, females, there's a certain look. It's almost predictable. I associate this with a sense of low self-esteem. You see it from the top, from the hair, fake eyelashes, a lot of makeup being used, a lot of surgery being done, whether that be lipo or just enhancements, nose jobs, mouth jobs, ear jobs, neck jobs, boob jobs, bum jobs. There's so much enhancement that takes place, but that is something that happens usually when a woman is not secure in her beauty. But more importantly, if she's producing content, she has to adapt to the needs of her subscribers. So suddenly it's that she has to keep doing something and doing something because she has to keep adapting. Adaptability then becomes a lifestyle. Here's the most important part of this whole thing. If you've had all your children and you've done it by the natural way, it's all done. People who start OnlyFans and who start all this sexual trade, they tend not to have children naturally, which means there are complications for the children, whether you go for cesarean, which has issues with your gut microbiome, issues with bonding, the fact that you have less oxytocin. If you've had a boob job, one of the key things men test women on is kissing and breasts. You might see kissing lips and kissing the breast. The reason being, a mother that nurtures, sometimes you have to feed the child, breastfeed the child for 2 years, and men are looking for women who could actually be good mothers. And that comes from your ability to use your natural given attributes. The younger you are, let's assume you're 24, and for some reason you believe, based on the content you've been producing and the feedback you're getting from your fans, that you would look better if you had a big breast, larger breasts, and you go for a boob job. Suddenly what you've done is you've taken away the natural opportunity you had, given to you by biology, for bonding with a child. When a mother breastfeeds, oxytocin is released. That creates more bonding between the mother and the child. But most importantly, one of the ways a baby's gut is secure for life comes from breastfeeding, because effectively the mother transfers her biome and gut biome from her breast to the child. But what you're finding these days is because you choose OnlyFans or sexual content or selling your sexuality, people have put to the side the responsibility that they once had by virtue of biology, which is the nurturing part of the mother. And so people are doing cesarean or having enhancements to their body, which does not allow them to nurture. So I am saying, get it out the way first, and then you can go full in, do whatever you want. It's important to understand that when you start producing OnlyFans, and I'll cover this in the session that I begin perhaps either tomorrow or next week. When you start making money, there's a mistake that women make, especially younger women, is you start to lead with your money. The reason, you have no accomplishment. You haven't achieved anything. You have no identity other than money. See, the love of money is the root of all evil. It's the same thing for men. One of the reasons we encourage young men to go out and work hard, go to McDonald's, start there, work 5-6 hours, then work 10 hours, then work 15 hours per day, but do the hard jobs, is because we want to teach them the value of money. Most importantly, we want to teach them that their identity is not intrinsically linked to something external from them. You see, one of the things I learned is that whenever you link your identity with something that is external to you, recognizing that there will always be change. Whenever change comes, you have a crisis of identity. Many a times men have midlife crisis because they have a crisis of identity because they link to themselves something that was external to them. For example, your beauty. What if you got an accident? Crisis of identity. For example, a mother. What if the children grow up and leave? Crisis of identity. A husband, a provider. What if she starts making more money than you? Crisis of identity. And you see, hell on earth will be to meet the person that you could have been. A crisis of identity awaits most of these OnlyFans girls because you haven't achieved anything beforehand. So when you start making money, you lead with money. And here's why it doesn't work. In the short term it does, in the long term it doesn't. I disagree with people who say, well, if you're an OnlyFans creator, men do not want you. That's nonsense. Absolute nonsense. I think, in my opinion, about 80% of the men in the UK have what I call the B software, the beta software. You were raised by a feminine mother, you're raised without a father, or you're raised by a feminine father, but a mother who called all the shots. So you've come to pedestalize the archetype called woman, and you don't really enjoy and not drawn to the archetype called man. So a lot of these young men, only about 20% of men are still traditional, and only half of that command the gravitas to make demands. So what you're looking at here is if 80% have the beta software, the feminine software, and another 10% have a traditional mindset but are not assertive enough, or dominant, confident, or successful, you have a plethora of options as women. You will find men who will accept you, primarily because most of these men were raised to look for 50-50 partnerships. And he who owns the gold makes the rules. So you will always find someone. The problem is you put yourself in a position to be finessed, because men will come in for the purpose of trying to finesse off of you. So keep in mind, and I'll cover this in this next session, I don't want to go into today's session, I'm going to talk about experience and money. Whenever someone with experience meets someone with money, the person with experience gets the money and the person with money gets the experience. You never want to be the one on the losing end of that transaction. And part of the way you can do this is not to lead with your wealth, but more importantly, a wise person once said, if someone gave you $1 million, it's best you become a millionaire quickly before you lose all the money. It's partly why when we see people who win the lottery, we feel sorry for them, because they did not have the foundation built: financial education, financial literacy, financial acumen. And so when they get the money, in not too short a timeline, they lose it all. What would it gain you if you gained the whole world but you lost your soul? I think we're going to see a lot more crises of women who OnlyFans in about 10-15 years, people who made so much money, but they lost all of it, but they lost their souls as part of this whole OnlyFans content creation. Now I'm going to bring today's session to a close. So I bring you and set you up for what will come in the sessions to follow. I would like to, in the sessions to follow, start going into some more technical information about women, to say, this is what you should have set up for you to help you manage your funds. These are the people you must have as an inner circle, people who can advise you, so that you make sure that you're doing things the legal way, you're saving, you're investing, and you're leading with your femininity. You see, one of the things you're going to have to learn if you're going to OnlyFans is how to double down on being a feminine woman, so that you're not leading with your masculine money-making ability, and you're not leading with, as though most of them do, as though you're a porn star. I hope today's session has been useful.